with AI, if you don't ask the question right, you don't get the answer. I use ChatGPT and Claude every day, personally and professionally. And I still find that they're not always so helpful or accurate as a final draft.
For sure.
And then when I look out at the landscape, I almost wanted to call my blog like, show me your templates, because I've gotten so much advice over the years and you're like, great, I hear what you're saying. Show me how that works. You should track the most important metrics. Great. What are they? What does this chart look like? You should have a clear budget allocation model. Okay, great. What does the budget allocation model really look like? And so the smartest experts get the best results out of AI. So trying to figure out, like, you didn't ask this question and you don't know that this is how you should do it, but here's what you really want would be a cool part of the agent.
You know, part of the thing I get to do is like scour the web for the most badass marketing leaders I can find. There are a few, and sometimes after lots of emails and smoke signals and doves, we get them in the studio, we get them on the show. Let me tell you about Carilu Dietrich. Former CMO, best known for steering Atlassian through its IPO. She's now a trusted advisor to CEOs and CMOs of hypergrowth companies. We're talking several, by the way, anywhere from 6 to 10 companies she's advising actively. And Carilu really is the go-to expert for operationalizing the chaos of scale. Carilu, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. You're making me blush. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to deliver.
Look, we get a lot of people on the show that are awesome. And you know, you're the first person that's come on the show that is advising as many companies as you're advising. So I actually want to just get into that for a second, because we've had a few that are advising, 2 to 3 and maybe doing some consulting, but like you're advising several businesses and they're all moving and grooving. So I just want to understand how are you advising this many? And you also have a family, you also have a life. I just want to double click into just tell us how you actually advise that many fast growth businesses.
Part of my dream, I guess, is to be the person that I needed when I was at Atlassian. So before Atlassian, I ran awareness advertising for Oracle. I had a really big budget. I did sports marketing, movie marketing. I wrote ads for the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the back page of the Economist. It was a big job and a high profile, but the company wasn't changing so quickly. My team went from 2 to 5 to 7 internally. And then we had this massive advertising agency, at 50, 100, 150 people that we were orchestrating and were implementing a lot of the things I was working on. But I became very good at building processes and improving processes in a more static environment. But then when I went to Atlassian, we were an early stage startup, an unknown developer tools company, founders out of Australia. And there were no processes. The CEOs had never worked at any other company. They were first-time founders who have worked their entire lives at Atlassian now. And everything was constantly changing so quickly. And I was a young leader. I didn't really have a strong network of experienced CMOs. I didn't have all the experience I would need to run all departments, having come from running advertising, having done product marketing, having done demand generation, but never being the leader over all of them at this really rapid scale. And we were innovating in go-to-market. We were one of the first product-led growth companies. So when I would go to talk to people, their tactics, their budgets, their approaches were very different from what we were doing. And I just felt very alone and confused. And of course, you fake it till you make it. And you invent as you go and you use first principles to come up with the best solutions and you hire the best people you can. I used every business book and strategy I could. But I really wanted someone who could help me on a day-to-day basis with best practices, help me organize my thoughts to have more conviction, and help me make decisions when there's no right answer. And so come full circle, now I partner with CEOs and CMOs of these hyper-scaling companies to help the CEO get the most out of the marketing leader and the marketing leader get conviction and knowledge to do a really exceptional job. So how do I have 7 clients? Almost all of my advisory comes from referrals from people I've worked for before or with before or clients. Actually, some of my CEO coaches refer me. other clients. So it's an exciting spot to be in right now.
One thing I love that you really emphasize on your LinkedIn, you emphasize it in your writing, and you did it as well here just now, is the relationship between the CEO and the CMO. And I love this topic. I love this. It's such a critical relationship, obviously. And I've talked to many marketing leaders that don't necessarily focus on this. Some do and some don't. But I want to understand kind of how you think about those two executive leaders, how you can, have these two reach across the aisle and really build trust. And really, again, if we're in a hyper growth roller coaster ride like this, there's a lot happening internally. And so talk about how you sit with these two leaders and the things that you notice, the things you pay attention to, how you bring them closer together, what's working, that sort of stuff.
When I first started advising, I was advising only CMOs, but I found that a lot of the problems that the marketers had weren't actually marketing problems. They were company strategy problems. A company strategy problem that shows up in marketing is not enough leads. And not enough leads could be the product's not differentiated. It's just not winning in the market, so people aren't turning into leads. You're trying to go after too many markets at the same time. Maybe you have a horizontal product and you're trying to go after government and financial services and high tech, and you don't have enough money to really get known in any of them. So that's a prioritization issue across the company, not just in marketing. Or perhaps you've planned so much substantial growth that you've overhired in sales. So there's not enough pipeline because the amount of pipeline you need is so far in excess of the organic pipeline you have and the budget that you have available. And so it was really critical to work with CEOs to say, hey, your marketing person is doing a good job. There's a lot of fantastic marketing people out there. There's things we can tweak and that I can help them. But really what we need to do is set these company goals more effectively or revisit the plan numbers across all of the silos. And so often the CEO can't hear that from a marketer who's missing their number because it sounds defensive. So someone trusted coming in and analyzing and trying to provide perspective on what's going on across the C-suite is really valuable.
What do you do when you get called in to advise a CMO that doesn't have a great relationship with the CEO? Let's say the business is doing well. I assume maybe you've faced this before. Let's say the business on paper is doing well. There's growth. They have the right X's and O's. The marketing strategy looks great, but yet you have this kind of interpersonal tension. And maybe I'm just curious if you face that. You don't have to name names, but what do you do in that scenario now? Because you know how important that relationship is. It's so critical. So how do you get in kind of, belly to belly with these people and you're like, okay, wow, this isn't a strategy problem. This is a trust or relationship issue. How do you navigate that? And what are some of the things that you've done to help these two leaders get really close?
One of the challenges is that day to day, the CEO and CMO have so many fires they're fighting that are really tactical, but sometimes they're not having the conversation behind the conversation. So sometimes I have an unfair advantage coming in and saying to the CEO, so how do you think the CMO is doing? And then they say like, well, I'm really frustrated about this or that or this. And then I say, have you told them? And they'll often say, well, kind of. I provided some feedback on this. I'll tell them, but it's difficult. There's a number of CEOs who are conflict averse, some that aren't, and that hurts. Sometimes feedback is a gift, even though it doesn't feel like it. And some CEOs are conflict averse and they won't really deliver the hard message about what challenges they see holding the CMO back. And so I think that's the first and most important thing, is to get it on the table. I think the second thing is giving the CMO some air cover. And this isn't for all clients. As I told you before, sometimes I'm advising a really accomplished CMO that has strong relationships across different silos and different departments. But sometimes the up and coming vice president or first time CMO might not have as close a connection to the CFO or the CRO or the chief product officer. And so sometimes I'll call those leaders as well, just to hear about their priorities, hear about their frustrations. And so from my perspective as an advisor, what I can offer is some interconnectivity with perspective that doesn't have as much emotional tension. It's hard when a chief revenue officer isn't making their number and feels like marketing's not supporting them. When marketing feels like the sales team isn't really run that well and isn't using the leads sufficiently, isn't following up on them fast enough or cohesively. And there can be a lot of interpersonal relationship tension. And on top of that, there's some process issues that we could put on the table and work through. I mean, really, the biggest problem with a lot of these leaders isn't that they don't know what to do, it's that there's so many options. There's no right
Mm-hmm.
answer. There's such a lack of time, and there's so much pressure. And so, again, if I come full circle, I think the advantage of an advisor is someone who can have much more context to help you work through your thoughts and hear your intuition to make the best choice you can in a difficult situation.
When you're partnered up with an experienced CMO, right? When you're pulled in to help someone they've got the background, the perspective, the pedigree, right? You look at the scoreboard, like they're doing well. What sort of air cover, what sort of support are you giving someone who's already got a lot of experience in that role?
One of the most important things that I bring to the table is just knowledge of a lot of different patterns. So I worked at Oracle, which is a Fortune 100. I've had a significant role in every single department of marketing. I was product marketing leader for one of the fastest growing products at a company before Oracle that was more than 150 million in revenue. I've run a demand generation team. I've run public relations for a public company, including investor relations. Obviously, I took Atlassian public. Now I've worked, over the last 5 years of advising, I've probably spoken to 100 CEOs. We've probably advised 25, 30 different companies in different capacities. So I know a lot about all the different patterns. And at first, I thought people wanted me to tell them the patterns, but really what my job is to hear the context of their current situation and help them think through different alternatives and think through the pros and cons of those alternatives. So even the top leaders, it's lonely at the top. You can't share
Mm-hmm.
some of your problems with the teams, especially, the financial market we're coming out of right now included a lot of different choices about org design and about spend that you can't necessarily talk to your team about because it affects them sometimes in negative ways. And you don't want to look uncertain as you talk to the CEO. When you're at a C-suite level, you don't just get to walk in and talk through all the different alternatives without a recommendation or hypothesis. So having someone who knows patterns can help you organize your thoughts and come with conviction is really helpful in some of these lonely top jobs.
So, Carilu, I just got to ask out the jump here. Do you have any space for any more clients? Because you're doing 6 to 10 right now. I'm figuring there. I mean, are you tapped out? What's going on here? Is there space for anything new?
I always take on one or two a year. So yes, and especially in the AI space, there's so much changing and happening. I'm really excited about it. So for the right exciting opportunity, yes.
Okay, well, you said my favorite word. I had a second follow up, but because you said AI, now I have to ask you this one question, maybe more, but this one specifically because AI and B2B marketing are like bread and butter right now. How do you help companies avoid becoming too reliant on AI while still embracing its full potential?
I think it's pretty difficult to become too reliant right this second. It feels like we're in the middle of a major shift. Is it the most major shift we've ever been through? I don't know, but I've been through the shift of the internet. I had dial up when I was a kid. I didn't have
Let's go.
internet in college until my sophomore year or something. I think they installed it. I had one of the very first phones because I worked for a phone company and I could text on my beeper, and that was the best technology ever. So, I've been through the internet. I've been through mobile. It was the year of mobile for many years while we were adapting software to mobile phones. I've been through the cloud transition, and all of those massive transitions have kind of led us here today to this moment where AI can be all it is. So I think it's changing everything. In B2B, it's changing all of our products, trying to figure out how to really use AI to make people more productive in the context of an application they're already using. I actually think that's the killer app because getting people to imagine how they could use it has a barrier to entry. At the same time, every single marketing department that I work with and company is trying to figure out how you retool all of your employees to be more productive. And there's probably a future where there's fewer of some types of jobs than we have now, right? There's far fewer saddle makers and elevator operators than there were in the history of the world. But I also think it's being used to make everyone smarter and more efficient. So I don't think you can over rely on it yet. I do think there's a lot of hallucination. We really need to like
Yes.
double check. Like we're just going to start to see the tip of the iceberg on lawsuits of companies being held accountable for mistakes that their AI chatbot on their website makes. I know there was one where an airline's AI chatbot promised someone bereavement fare that later the airline didn't want to honor because it wasn't
Oh,
truly in their policy. The lawsuit went in the favor of the customer who was told by an AI chatbot what the policy was. So, I
wow.
think there's a ton that's going to happen around privacy, around security, around trustworthiness. But we're starting to see, massive gains in the companies that provide that, like Claude from
Hmm.
Anthropic, I think is one with the lowest number of hallucinations. And then they say part of that is the way they've trained it around values and social good thinking. But everyone's going to have to retool here.
Is there an example that you can think of where AI helped you or, someone that you're working with solve a marketing challenge that you couldn't solve before?
Yes, I think it's mostly in the scale and personalization right now. Marketing teams have always wanted to personalize as much as possible at mass scale, but there's just limitations of time and resources to write 1,000 landing pages with accurate, customized information. So a number of companies I know of are doing long tail SEO content around super highly personalized topics that include a keyword with a customized ad and a customized landing page. So, I think there are some things that we've never done before. But I think even more than that is just moving faster on analyzing. I'm seeing people use AI from product marketing to assimilate customer interviews that would have taken you a really long time to listen to every customer interview,
Hmm.
send updates, around strategy options that you could pursue and trade-offs around goals, around translation. I think every aspect of marketing, people are experimenting with it. But still, I think that the real breakthroughs are going to be the products that we use, making it easy to use in the flow of our normal work.
Has anyone made a Carilu Dietrich custom GPT yet?
That would be pretty cool. Not yet.
I mean,
I should.
Carilu, I could take every interview you've ever given. I could take every epic blog post. By the way, shout out to Carrie Lou's blog. Like, she writes a very consistent blog. I see it on LinkedIn all the time. But I could take every piece that you've ever written. I could take every interview you've ever given. I could take any kind of commentary that's available online. I can literally train GPT to be the Carrie Lou GPT. And now I've got Carrie Lou Dietrich in my pocket, and I can ask her about hypergrowth, bootstrap growth, all the things. And so if no one's done that yet, you better hurry because I will.
But here's the problem, right? What's the compensation model for that? So my
Mm.
current compensation model is one-on-one work with CEOs and CMOs where I really understand and give them custom feedback based on their context. Some group types of coaching. So a colleague and I are going to start a CMO AI working group where every other month some elite CMOs talk together about what they're trying to approach in AI. So some group coaching, I'm thinking about having some online courses potentially. I have this blog, which I request people to pay for. If you can just take all of it and have a custom GPT and it's free for everyone, how do we compensate people to keep creating content? Because time is money and it's difficult. So I do think there's a lot of issues there, which, the media landscape has pointed out, right? I think the New York Times has been the most litigious to try to protect
Mm.
some of their content. But it's a real issue if AI can take information from creators and just repopulate it themselves all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think it's super interesting to consider, and it's someone's got to got to do it. There's a lot of talk around AI agents, right? A lot, and I think there's a really epic thought leader that I've been connecting with more. This guy, Danny Kitchian, I think is his last name. And his concept is some of his ideas around, like taking someone like Carilu and then having them spend some time training an AI agent. And then every time that AI agent gets used, Carilu gets compensated, right? And so at scale, you've got 100 marketing leaders using Carilu's actual trained AI agent by Carilu. Well, now all of a sudden Carilu's got this, this compensation model where she's getting compensated to maintain it and make sure it's good, and then other people, get the benefit of using it. So I think there could be some things swaying that way, but you're right. I mean, now it's like wild, wild west. I have a ton of custom GPTs that I've made because it's the acceleration it gives me, the utility it gives me is, it's wild. I can create, a knowledge base based on one person, and I can go incredibly deep, and that person's not getting compensated, in the way that they could. So I love that you brought that up.
It's a tricky world of a lot of transition. I think
Mm-hmm.
I also, I use ChatGPT and Claude every day,
Mm-hmm.
personally and professionally. It's part of my job to try to get as deep as I can. And I still find that they're not always so helpful or accurate as a final draft
For
partner.
sure.
They're a
For
great
sure.
concepting partner, organizing partner, and editing partner. And then when I look out at the landscape, part of what drives me in my blog, I almost wanted to call my blog like, show me your templates, because I've gotten so much advice over the years, and you're like, great, I hear what you're saying. Show me how that works. And so a number of my blogs, I try to go and collect people's templates and say like, okay, you should track the most important metrics. Great. What are they? What does this chart look like? You should have a clear budget allocation model. Okay, great. What does the budget allocation model really look like? And so sometimes with AI, if you don't ask the question right, you don't get the answer. Right. And so I do think there's also this like the smartest experts get the best results out of AI still. And so trying to figure out like, you didn't ask this question and you don't know that this is how you should do it, but here's what you really want would be a cool part of the agent.
So you said you use Claude and GPT, which is very similar. I have like, my daily flow is like email, calendar, GPT, Claude. Those are the tabs that are open every day. What are you using Claude for? Are you kind of testing each to kind of see what answers you're getting for more accuracy? Or you're like, hey, Claude's more creative flow, GPT more strategy. How are you kind of pulling those tools out right now?
So one person I follow in marketing is Marcel Santilli, who is the CMO of DeepGram and now has his own ScaleX SEO AI consulting company of sorts. And I went to one of his trainings where he trains you about the long tail of SEO using AI. And I got into it and I realized totally a CMO thing that I actually don't know enough depth of SEO in today's land to do every step that he's doing. I think, I just want to hire him for all my clients. Like, I don't have to learn everything he knows, but I have to know that he's out there and make sure that we're using it to get the competitive advantage. And part of his process is using the two AI LLMs together, getting different answers out of both of them for different steps of the process and asking each other about them. So I've used them in concert for a number of things. Primarily I use it around my blog. So I've used Midjourney for images and I've used ChatGPT for images. I hope that Claude gets images. That would be nice. Because I don't love what I get from ChatGPT on images.
Me neither.
And then I've started using Canva and I've been like playing around with Adobe's Creative Suite and their AI. And then I use it to concept ideas, to think about the SEO, to edit some of the blogs. I find that the most effective use is for titles, coming up with a whole bunch of different titles that would have better click-through rates. And then I use it for different things. I did a blog a while back about where I wanted to look at venture capitalists get rated in this Forbes Midas list, which shows the most successful venture capitalists of the year. But venture capitalists' investment timeline is actually much longer, right? Most funds are 7 to 10 years.
Right.
And so I wanted to look at which venture capitalist had won the most Midas mentions, both as individuals and as firms. And so I wanted to do this big data analysis where I took 13 years of data and I plugged it in and I got some tables and they made some charts. And man, I worked with ChatGPT for days on it and couldn't get it to work and ended up calling a friend who's like an Excel spreadsheet hacker. And then he ended up using ChatGPT to do some of the like data input in some of the unique steps. But generally, he drove the process. So I don't know. I also used it to create the perfect variety of meals for my guinea pig to get it enough vitamin
Ooh.
C and calories. So I would like to say that I go high and low.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of my favorite use cases personally is, we have children, we have little children in our house. And so for story time, and you can steal this one if you want. For story time, I'll ask all four of our kids, I'll say, okay, give me a character. So each kid is like, turtle, lion, whatever, ninja. And so I'll say, give me a character. And then I'll say, what are their superpowers? And they'll say, whatever it could be anything, literally. And then I'll say, okay, cool. And then I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll say, okay, here I'm reading a bedtime story to my kids. Write a story from these characters. And I also want you to weave in emotional intelligence, leadership, conscious relationship, all the things. I want you to also weave in like telling the truth or whatever thing I want to teach that day, because lying is a big thing when you have toddlers, like telling the truth. And then GPT will tell an amazing story. And at the end of that story, I'll say, okay, now create an image of the characters. And so then it creates this image of the characters and all the kids are like, oh my God. So it's cultivating their imagination while I'm reading it. They're just listening. And then they look at the picture and it's the highlight. Now they're like, Papa, please, let's do the story. Let me tell you, it's the most amazing thing. It's the funnest hack for stories.
I love it so much, especially because I had this whole series that I told as to my kids. I'd like my made up series about this seagull named Benny that lived in Manhattan Beach where I grew up and was like at the beach where I grew up. And basically the story is like little vignettes from my childhood that I remember about like snorkeling in Catalina and like running on the beach. And Benny really loves Cheetos because if you go in the water and you're at the beach and you leave your backpack open, Benny will open your backpack and eat the Cheetos, which is true story of my favorite food, like taken by evil seagulls that have now been, memorialized as cute children's stories. But I will say that my creativity in getting the hero's arc could use some help between 9 and 10:30 at night. You're like totally fried. So I don't know. You're about 7 years too late to reinvent my life, but I love it so much.
I love it. It's really been awesome. We are having a tale of a time at our house for sure. There's something I want to touch on this and then I want to cover other things, but I just love this AI stuff. And I just, especially because I have you in the moment, there is an AI benchmark test called the MMLU Pro. Have you heard of this one?
Mm-mm.
It's the massive multitask language understanding. MMLU is the original one. It was basically a bunch of, rigorously curated questions that were asked. And so ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, all of them were, taking this test to see where they are on the benchmark. Okay. Then the MMLU Pro came out, which is even more enhanced. And so it's, 12,000 questions. It's across like biology, business, chemistry, comp-sci, economics, engineering, health, history, law, math, all these things. And so I've been paying attention to this benchmark, and just to put this in your garden to plant the seed. At the top of this test, at the top of the model, which by the way, I don't know much about this company because if you search for them, there's not much there. But at the very top, above Claude, above Grok, above GPT-4o, is this model called ARX, ARX 0.3. And so what that tells me is, and this is measuring across all these different subject matters, removing hallucination even more. And so we're getting to the point where, it's not at 100%. I think the overall score is, I have it pulled up, it's like 0.7824. That's the top overall score. So we're at 78% essentially in terms of accuracy. Mm-hmm. And so it's getting there, but eventually you'll have these models that are going to be 100% accurate or really close to it. And then it becomes really interesting of like, now you can start to rely on these tools. And I don't know who this ARX 0.3 is because there's not a tool you can use yet, but they're clearly beating, the multi-billion Claude and Grok and GPT-4o. And so that's interesting in and of itself. And so if you hear of ARCs, let me know, please. But I've been seeing like they've not moved off of the leaderboard for 2 months. They've been beating all of them for at least 2 months.
I'll have to keep an eye on it. I mean, it's interesting coming from Atlassian and a developer marketing background. The consumer side is really important, and ChatGPT seems to have kind of an early lead there, of course, but also the embedded API aspect of the LLM is really important. And Anthropic is beating ChatGPT there, and we'll see. I mean,
Oh,
is beating Cloud there from a revenue perspective, I think. But it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, right? Netscape isn't really around anymore. Google took the market.
that's right.
Like Lyft and Uber separated substantially. It does feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's still early Wild West, and there's the opportunity for a lot of different technologies to weave their ways. The difficulty, though, seems in this wave how much money and compute power you need. The affiliation with Microsoft and Google and AWS being a backbone of the leaders makes it harder to imagine disruption by tiny entrants, but we'll see.
Yeah, you're nailing it. This is the stuff that I'm like up thinking about of like because like you said, it takes a lot of capacity to move these things, to power these systems and models. And so is someone going to come in with a different way to do that? Is it going to keep just being more money, more capacity is the winner?
I mean, I think from a marketing perspective, what's terrifying, I have this funnel of energies that I just printed out yesterday. It's like the funnel of energy: fear
Ooh,
and grief and depression are on the bottom, and enthusiasm and optimism are on the top. And I would say
wow.
AI really makes you like take the whole journey, right? Because like, are we all going to lose our jobs? Like, what are people going to do? I'm in a taxi, and I've taken a Waymo now, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know if Waymos are everywhere. Am I going to be employing Lyft riders? Like, there's some scary stuff. Like, what are my kids going to do for their job? But the flip side, and what I was getting at was for marketing, we used to market on radio and in newspapers. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was this small job on a team when you were the digital person. Now an entire marketing team is the digital person. And newspapers and radio are still useful as part of a portfolio, but they're certainly not what they were to our parents or grandparents. And you look at this last decade, and Atlassian's growth was really on the back of SEO. I mean, 80% of our
Mm.
leads were inbound SEO. We owned SEO for Agile and for
Wow.
developers. And so if
Wow, I
you
didn't
had
know
a
that.
question, you went to Google, you ended up on our website, we educated you. We had this whole philosophy around no forms, no gated content, just like get as educated as you want. And when you're ready, we're here. Start using the product. Use the product for free for 7 days, 30 days. We tried all sorts of different day limits. And then the product was so good that you used it. But the whole marketing model was based around internet searches that went to pages. And in a world of AI, where your agent goes on the internet and maybe you never see ads, and your agent populates content and you don't even go to a website to build trust with the vendor who's providing you that information, it kind of comes full circle back to the Carilu GPT.
Mm-hmm.
As a company, so Carta, for instance, does this really great social media um, data content that's really fascinating, that answers all these questions. And you might say like, oh, that's so interesting. Let me go to Carta's site and learn some more. Oh, Carta isn't just a cap table anymore. Now it's also helping um, investors manage their entire portfolio. Oh, now I've learned something else. Like, it's kind of like the fear. And when I was little and I had a question, my dad would make me go to an encyclopedia, and you'd find your answer in the encyclopedia, but you'd get to read some stuff that was around it and learn that next to, trees were typhoons, and all of a
Right,
sudden people
right.
got typhoons, and that you lost that on the internet. But then we replaced it because now you can go really deep. But from a marketing perspective, it's going to be a whole new wild frontier of how we get to consumers and associate with them through AI. And perhaps AI will start having ads, ads in the answers, right? That would be the easiest, obvious choice. But we'll
Mm-hmm.
see how this plays out.
I mean, my 6-year-old says she doesn't say, hey, dad, go to Google. She says, hey, dad, pull up GPT. Ask GPT. I mean, that's what they're asking. And I know for myself, I'm curious for you as well. Like I spent 3 years working at Google. I love Google. I had a great time there. I learned how to move fast and break things, and I'll always cherish my time at the big Googs. And I just don't use it much anymore. I might pull Google up on my phone maybe once a week. Like truly, I'm just not using it as a resource and a tool because I have access because I can, and GPT's getting better and Claude's getting better. And so it's like I can get what I need in the way that I want to receive it. And so I'm not even searching on Google. I'm using it to find like on my Google Maps, shout out Gmaps, but that's really about it. How about you?
I find so many problematic hallucinations in my work interactions that I'm reticent to trust it completely. I guess if
Okay.
you come full circle back to what we teach our kids about the internet, you
Mm-hmm.
teach your kids about the internet. If you make a search, don't believe every site. Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
that person's motivation for sharing that information? And can they be trustworthy? Can you go to a site that you believe has the accurate information? And can you be sure that they're not leading you astray? And I
Mm.
still don't trust, what did you say? 78% was that the answers
Yeah,
right? I sure
78%.
as hell
Yeah.
don't want my doctor to have a 78% success rate on
Good
a
point.
rare disease that I have.
Right, right.
I was researching some medication for one of my kids this weekend, and I was asking Claude about the medication and different medications. And then I had this moment where I was like, if it's hallucinating on this, is that worth it to me? I'd rather go to WebMD or the
Mm.
Mayo Clinic
Mm-hmm.
and see what they say. So I think that the consumers have to be really smart. And as we see more agents come up, I think agents are not going to have our best interest in mind unless we pay for them. And even then,
Mm-hmm.
there's a question about that, right? Because it's going to be some vendor who wants to collect all the information about you. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, what if you ask questions that you don't want shared and they retarget you? I mean, the most offensive ad I've ever had retarget me was when my mom died and my aunt died, and I had written 2 obituaries in a couple weeks, and I had like kicked something off on some site that a life insurance company had like a child kneeling by a grave saying like, is your family protected? And it
Wow.
was bottom feeding that I'm sure is really effective,
Mm-hmm.
but I should have some right to privacy.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what if someone is having mental health issues and says like, what is alcoholism? What if you have thoughts of suicide? Like,
Mm.
what are the searches and the experiences that people should be allowed to have privately, separate from advertisers, and maybe separate also from like their healthcare providers or a life insurance company that could buy information to associate and put you in a different buying category? I mean, there's a lot. Again, I try to go back to my energy map and be like, okay, I'm in fear. That's good. How can I protect myself? And how can I also kind of come up to hopefulness and optimism? And so
Wow.
I get excited by things like, again, Anthropic really intrigues me and their commitments.
Mm.
They published in the last couple of weeks some new commitments and treaties to privacy and protection and election. It was specific to the election, preventing false information around political agendas. And and I think we need to be really smart about the intent that technology has for the advertiser, the company, or for the individual.
I totally agree. I think that's like these are the conversations. I think they're just they have to be happening with you and your executive people that you're working. They have to be happening like a lot across industries, across segments, because you have this race of technology, this race of AI. Who's the most accurate? Who's got the most utility? Who's got the best agent at scale? And then you've got this very real reality of these examples that you gave of like, well, yes, and like let's be conscious of what we as human beings actually need and can appreciate and can really use versus being overtaken by it. So I hope that, behind closed doors and in the boardrooms, you're having these conversations, because I agree. It's like, this is what's going to shape it, is having this sort of dialogue. I can't believe we're at time already. This is ridiculous. I have 150 more questions for you, Carilu. You say often that hypergrowth is driven by an amazing product rather than marketing alone. I meet a lot of executives that are like, just come on, we need marketing. We need to fuel more growth. Like, we just need more leads, more, all the thing, more revenue. So how do you help these sorts of executives adjust their expectations when they're relying too heavily on marketing to fuel growth, especially when maybe product market fit isn't really there yet?
Marketing is a megaphone, not a magic wand. And there were a number of years where cheaper cash allowed us to spend a lot of money on inefficient marketing. And those years have not have gone away in the last couple of years. So a lot of executives have been forced to realize that marketing is not a magic wand. The highest growth companies are the companies who have inbound interest, either from word of mouth or from online virality, right? Like OpenAI took off and got massive adoption without a marketing department. They didn't hire a marketing leader for another 6 or 8 months. And that marketing leader is a vice president of marketing who's mostly focused on developers and their developer business, not even their consumer business. So, I mean, just a case in point. But Atlassian as well, our growth was driven 80 to 85% by inbound organic interest in this SEO and content and education. So there's a lot of things that you can do to stoke that, right? Like having fantastic content, being a thought leader, publishing really innovative data, being in a market category that's growing. Again, Atlassian's was develop our software is eating the world. Like if software is going to massively change the world, you need developers in every company to create software for every company. And those developers need tools to be more effective. And Atlassian really rode that wave. So I think of marketing as a dartboard, and at the inside is people who come to you, and farther out is people who kind of have heard about you and are in market for something, and you have a chance at reaching. And then farthest out is like they don't know about you, they don't really know they have the problem, and marketing can hit all of those. Advertising is often reaching people that know less about you or are maybe less in market. They're not coming to your website or searching for you on a competitive rating site or something. And so those outer rings are really expensive. So you just need to test your way into, are we targeting the right people with the right message? And does this spend support the lifetime value? And sometimes, if you have customers that last 3 or 5 years, you could spend up to 2 years of a lifetime value to get them and grow that revenue over time. But for a lot of companies, really broad paid advertising is not as good a use of money as putting more money into having a better product that really meets needs and gets users to talk about it, take it with them to the next job, and tell their friends.
Prioritization is another major challenge, I'll say challenge for marketers, right? And I know you're advising companies that they're already in, most if not all of them are already in this hyper growth stage. So here comes Carilu parachuting in. How do you guide them in deciding, which marketing initiatives to focus on versus which ones to cut to ensure that long-term success? Because I imagine you've got some venture-backed folks that have this aggressive goals, aggressive targets, right? How do you, so many options, as you said earlier, right? How are you actually guiding the people you're working with? Hey, what should we be focusing on right now? What should we cut?
The biggest mistake, to come full circle, is that the company itself doesn't have its prioritization clear. Because if a marketing team prioritizes some things, and then the sales org prioritizes some other things, and the product team prioritizes some other things, and then they all try to get each other to support them, you end up in this peanut butter spread where there's a little bit of effort on everything. So the biggest mistake I see companies making is that at the corporate level, their goals aren't clear and prioritized enough. And for some smaller companies that I advise, they just don't have a lot of structure and diligence around an OKR process and like a quarterly business review process. That is what bigger companies use to talk about the trade-offs of prioritizing something versus the other. So for a lot of marketers, I recommend they help drive the corporate planning process because marketing is the one that gets pulled in the most directions. And marketing can be the voice of the customer to say, it's not about what we care about necessarily. It's what's going to get us more customers and more revenue. And so I think it starts with the financial plan and the OKRs to get those right, and then to make sure marketing is aligning to that, and then to having really consistent metrics that you're tracking to see, are you getting a return on investment on the whole, or at least you have conviction that you're spending money on the right audience with the right message. And now all this sounds so cliche, which again is why I started this blog, carilu.com, to kind of provide some really specific examples. And one of the most specific examples that's the most referenced blog is one about a biweekly marketing dashboard that aligns sales objectives and marketing objectives, and is kind of the core tracking metric to say, is everything together working? If not, which things should we do more of or deprioritize?
As a side note, if you're a CMO and you don't want to get fired, one of Carilu's like most popular articles, I think, is like the top. I think it was like the top 5 reasons CMOs get fired. Something like that. It's like one of your most popular articles.
CMOs have a really hard job. It's the art and the science. It's the product marketing strategy, and it's the financial discipline of filling a pipeline and converting all that pipeline to revenue. And it's very difficult for CMOs to do both or have learned to do both. So yes, I think that the top 5 reasons, one of them included not knowing the data and not being close enough to the actual revenue levers. And another one included not knowing the market and not really thinking forward about the growth levers for the company, but just kind of executing what comes to you. I think a third is really around trust. Even if the company's not performing, if a leader has a trusted relationship with their chief revenue officer and CEO and CFO, that they've got a hypothesis about why, they have a clear plan of action to address it, they have a timeline, and they show progress and are proactive about reporting on that timeline. There's a lot that you can do around trust along the way that's not just winning. We don't have to have all the answers, but we have to have a really strong plan that looks like it's headed in the right direction. So I think those are 3 of the big highlights that it's hard to be, strategic and tactical at the same time, but that's part of the magic of the best CMOs.
Okay, mic drop moment. Final question. This is now where I want you to visualize you and me on a stage, a million people in the audience listening to this last question for Carilu Dietrich. This is when you take the mic, and whatever you say after this, you're going to just drop it, and they're going to applaud, and there'll be tears and laughter and all the things. Okay. Carilu Dietrich, knowing all the things that you know, all of your perspective, all your experience, all your strong opinions, weak opinions, like everything that, really makes you at this point in time in 2024. What is a piece of advice, something you'd want every marketing leader to hear you say today? What would you say?
I think it's not just for marketing leaders. I think it's also for CEOs. But in the end, it's to trust their intuition. A lot of the work that I do with people is reflect back to them what they're telling me, but that they're debating themselves. This person on the team isn't really working. We're falling behind. I don't feel like we're taking the right tactics. So you say, oh, so this isn't working. You're falling behind. What tactics do you think you should be taking? And more often than not, it's difficult, right? Because if I have something that's written on my tombstone, or if I get a tattoo, it will be a yin and a yang. It's the combination of being open-minded. You have to be open-minded to constantly be learning and thinking and hearing, and also trusting your intuition, because often you really know, and you need to gather the information to get closer to it. But when I look back at Atlassian, I spent a lot of time worried. And in the end, a lot of the things I could have, should have, would have done, I knew. It just takes a lot of courage, because these leadership positions are really hard. And so one step at a time with your intuition as a guide.
I love it. Carilu Dietrich, thank you so much for being on the show. This was so fun. This was so dope. And ladies and gentlemen, if you could be quiet for a second. Carilu, thank you so much for being here. Seriously, you're dope. I'm paying a full attention to what you're up to. You are not getting rid of me. I'm in your inbox. I'm watching your blog. I'm doing all the things. And I know a lot of people that listen to this show are soon going to be, doing the same thing. So thank you for making time today, truly.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I enjoy the show. You have great folks, and I'm lucky to be a part of it.